Everything you knew about medieval unsanitary conditions may turn out to be a huge misconception. For decades, we have been told that people in the past drank only wine and beer because water was deadly dangerous, riddled with disease, and literally killed people. But the reality is much more complicated. Historical records, city statutes, and archaeological excavations show that our ancestors were not just dirty, but outstanding masters of survival in conditions where a mistake could cost you your life. They did not have microscopes, laboratories, or knowledge about bacteria, but they had other weapons, incredibly keen observation skills and traditions that had been honed over centuries. They knew how to turn murky, foul-smelling sludge into water that could be drunk every day. Moreover, sometimes this water was cleaner than what flows from modern decorative fountains. Watch the video to the end to learn how simple stones and ordinary river sand saved entire cities from epidemics. What clever techniques medieval inhabitants used to purify water without a single drop of boiling water, and why their methods are becoming relevant again today. What if I told you that the best filter in human history was the dirt under our feet? Ancient wisdom said that taking water directly from a river was a sure path to illness and weakness. People in the Middle Ages understood perfectly well that running water carried silt, debris, and invisible dangers washed away from fields and roads. Therefore, the first and most reliable way to obtain clean water was to use the shoreline as a natural barrier. They never drew water with buckets directly from the rushing stream if there was a chance to be more cunning. The technique involved digging a deep pit a few meters from the water's edge. This depression had to be below the level of the river so that the laws of physics would work in man's favor. Water from the riverbed began to seep through the thickness of earth, sand, and clay, seeking to fill the void. Passing through this dense layer of soil, it left behind all the large dirt, silt, and suspended matter. The pit accumulated liquid that was many times clearer and cleaner than that flowing in the river itself. This method required patience as the pit filled slowly, drop by drop, but the result was worth it. The earth acted as a giant sponge, trapping everything unnecessary and allowing only moisture to pass through. Such water was called earth or dug water, and it was considered much more noble than river water. Often, the walls of such a pit were reinforced with a wattle of branches or stones to prevent the soil from crumbling back. This turned a temporary pit into a permanent source of clean water for a camp or village. Nature itself suggested this method to people, as springs often flowed right next to riverbeds. People simply imitated the natural process, creating artificial springs in convenient locations. The denser the soil between the river and the pit, the better the purification. Sandy banks were ideal for this, allowing water to pass through quickly, but retaining silt. Clay soils worked more slowly but produced crystal clear water. It is important to note that such filter wells were made not only near rivers, but also near lakes and swamps. In marshy areas, this was perhaps the only way to obtain water that did not smell of slime and rot. A thick layer of moss and peat acted as a powerful absorbent, soaking up unpleasant odors. Travelers and hunters knew that you couldn't drink from a swamp, but you could drink from a pit next to it. Interestingly, this method was scaled up from a single hole to huge trenches supplying fortresses. Besieged garrisons often survived thanks to such hidden sources fed by groundwater. It was the first line of defense against thirst, requiring no sophisticated tools. A shovel and knowledge of the terrain replaced complex purification facilities. The quality of such water was determined by eye. If there were no particles floating in it and it was clear, then the earth had done its job. Of course, this did not protect against dissolved poisons, but mechanical purification was at the highest level. People trusted the earth more than open water, believing that the depths purified everything. It was an intuitive understanding of filtration processes that saved millions of lives. Sometimes a layer of clean river sand or fine gravel was added to such pits. This created an additional barrier to turbidity and made the bottom convenient for scooping. Water that had passed through meters of soil was always cool, which was also appreciated in the summer heat. It did not bloom as quickly as water heated by the sun in an open reservoir. Knowledge of this method was passed down from father to son as one of the main survival skills. You didn't have to be a scientist to see the difference between a muddy stream and the clear water in the pit. It was a simple technology, accessible to everyone, that worked flawlessly in all climatic conditions. We would love to hear your opinion. Did you know about this simple purification method, which is even used by modern survivalists? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a city built on seawater obtained fresh water? Venice, surrounded by a saltwater lagoon, had no access to springs or rivers, but its inhabitants drank the purest water. The engineers of the time created a unique rainwater collection system that turned the city squares into giant filters. It was not just a construction project, but the creation of a complex hydraulic structure under the feet of passers-by. The entire city was literally permeated with hidden reservoirs working for the benefit of society. Under the paving stones of each large square, a huge pit was dug and insulated with dense clay. The clay prevented salty groundwater from penetrating inside and fresh water from seeping into the ground. The center of the pit was occupied by a deep well made of special porous bricks. The entire space around the well was filled with clean river sand of various sizes. The system worked as follows. Rainwater flowed from the roofs and pavement into special receiving holes around the perimeter of the square. These holes did not lead into the well itself, but into the thick layer of sand surrounding it. The water had to travel a long way through meters of sand before reaching the walls of the central shaft. The sand trapped street dirt, dust, and debris, acting as an ideal natural filter. The brick walls of the well in the center also acted as a membrane, allowing only purified water to pass through. As a result, moisture that had undergone double and triple purification accumulated inside the shaft. It was cold, dark, and completely devoid of the smell of the city streets. Such water could be stored for months without spoiling or blooming due to the absence of light. Venetian cisterns were so effective that the water from them was considered one of the cleanest in Europe. It was a triumph of engineering, turning a disadvantage of the territory into an advantage. Every drop of rain that fell on the city became a valuable resource, not just a puddle underfoot. The residents took care of these structures, and special caretakers monitored their condition. The keys to the well covers were often kept by parish priests or neighborhood elders. Access to water was granted at specific times to control consumption and prevent contamination. Interestingly, the sand for these filters was brought in specially from mainland dunes. It had to be of a certain grain size so that it would not clog too quickly and would allow water to pass through easily. The layer of sand was changed or washed every few decades, which was a huge event for the city. Many fortresses and castles standing on high cliffs adopted the Venetian experience. Where it was impossible to reach groundwater, similar precipitation collection systems were built. The roofs of towers and palaces became water collectors, and basements were turned into storage facilities. This allowed garrisons to withstand months-long sieges without relying on external sources. Such a system required enormous labor during the construction phase, but then worked for centuries with virtually no maintenance. It was an example of long-term planning that is rarely seen even in the modern world. The city literally stood on its drinking water, and this was the key to its independence and prosperity. In the next chapter, you will learn how the noble metal was used in an invisible war for purity.
The harvest tide.
Want to know the secret that saved the lives of the aristocracy and clergy for centuries? While the poor relied on sand and earth, the wealthy classes used the properties of precious metals. In the Middle Ages, silver was valued not only as currency or decoration, but also as a powerful means of preserving food freshness. People noticed that water in silver jugs did not spoil for weeks, even in the hottest weather. The mechanism of action was unknown to them. They did not know about ions and their effect on microorganisms. For medieval people, this was akin to a divine miracle, or the natural magic of metal. It was believed that the purity of silver was transferred to water, ennobling it and expelling its bad properties. That is why silver tableware was always used at the tables of kings and dukes. Those who could not afford a whole set of precious metal tableware used a simpler method. They would throw a silver coin or spoon into an oak barrel of water intended for long-term storage. Even this small piece of metal had an effect on a large volume of liquid. Travelers and merchants always carried a silver object with them to dip into a flask of water from a questionable source. This method was especially common in church life when storing holy water. Communion cups and baptismal fonts were often made of silver or coated with it on the inside. This allowed the water to remain clear and pleasant to the taste for a long time, which strengthened the faith of the parishioners. The purity of water was associated with spiritual purity, and silver was the bridge between them. Armies going on long campaigns tried to carry water in silver vessels for their commanders. Ordinary soldiers, of course, made do with wood and leather, which often led to disease in the camp. The difference in health between the nobility and the commoners was often explained by the quality of the water they drank. Silver was a kind of passive bodyguard for the elite. There were even legends that silver water could heal ailments and wounds. Doctors recommended washing cuts with such water, and it really helped to avoid inflammation. This strengthened the belief in the miraculous properties of the metal, causing people to spend huge amounts of money on tableware. A silver cup was an investment in the health of the whole family. Master jewelers created special vessels with wide bottoms to increase the area of contact between the water and the metal. The inner surface of the jugs was never polished to a mirror shine, leaving it rough. This, unbeknownst to them, increased the effectiveness of the purification process. Intuition and experience replaced laboratory research. In some regions, silver plates were used to line the insides of ship barrels. This was fabulously expensive, but it allowed the ship's crew to survive long voyages. Maritime powers were willing to pay any price for the opportunity to have fresh water in the middle of the salty ocean. Water conservation was a strategic advantage for the fleet. Of course, silver could not cleanse water of dirt or turbidity. It only worked against invisible contamination. Therefore, the water was first settled or filtered through cloth, and only then placed in a silver vessel. This was the final stage of purification, a polishing of quality available only to the select few. Thus, social stratification was evident even in the water people drank. Silver became a symbol not only of wealth, but also of safety, health, and longevity. Like if you are surprised by the ingenuity of our ancestors, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about survival in the Middle Ages. What if everything you've been taught about the complexity of purification can be replaced by simple waiting? The most accessible and widespread method of improving water quality was simple settling. Every wealthy house, castle, or monastery had a special room or cool cellar with large containers. People knew that water had to settle and lose its weight before it could be served at the table. The process began with water brought from a river or well being poured into huge oak barrels. These barrels were never emptied completely, leaving a layer of sediment at the bottom, which was then washed out. The water was left to stand for at least a day, but preferably 2 or 3. During this time, under the force of gravity, all the particles of sand, silt, and clay slowly sank to the bottom. The water at the top of the barrel became surprisingly clear and clean in appearance. The secret was to carefully remove this upper fraction without disturbing the sediment. For this purpose, special scoops with long handles or taps cut above the bottom level were used. This required a steady hand and caution, but the result was visible to the naked eye. An overflow system was often used, with the vessels arranged in a cascade, one below the other. Water from the upper barrel slowly flowed through a gutter with a cloth filter into the lower one. Some of the dirt remained in each container, and only the purest moisture reached the bottom. This system made it possible to purify large volumes of water for garrisons or large kitchens. An important condition was the place where the settling took place. It had to be dark and cool. Sunlight caused the water to bloom and turn green, which they tried to avoid at all costs. Therefore, reservoirs were always hidden in the deepest basements or covered with stone canopies. Temperature and tranquility were the main allies in the fight for quality. Not only visible particles settled, but also many invisible impurities. The water became softer, and the sharp smell of mud or iron disappeared. Housewives knew that food cooked better and drinks tasted better with settled water. Using cloudy water was considered a sign of bad taste and negligence. Sometimes alum or crushed almonds were added to the settling barrels. These substances acted as coagulants, causing small particles to clump together into flakes and settle to the bottom more quickly. This was already a real chemical process, discovered through experimentation. Knowledge of such additives was kept secret and passed on by masters of their craft. Settling was a mandatory step before any other use of water. Even if the water was going to be boiled for brewing beer, it was first settled. This protected the boilers from scale and improved the taste of the final product. The purity of the raw materials was the key to the success of any brewer. This method taught people patience and how to plan their supplies in advance. You couldn't just bring water and drink it right away. You had to have a supply of settled water. This approach disciplined everyday life and created a certain rhythm of life in the home. Gravity worked for free and around the clock, purifying tons of water without human intervention. It was the most passive but one of the most effective methods of that era. In the next chapter, you will learn how they dealt with the bad smell of water using air. Many people noticed that water from a stagnant pond had a musty, unpleasant taste, while water from a mountain waterfall was sweet and fresh. Medieval people drew a practical conclusion from this observation. Water needs to be given a chance to breathe. The process of pouring water from one vessel to another from a great height was used to improve its taste and remove bad odors. This was called revitalizing the water, restoring its natural power. Technically, this looked like repeated pouring in a thin stream so that the water would come into maximum contact with the air. Servants raised jugs high above their heads and poured water into a vat standing on the ground. The water broke against the surface, saturating with oxygen and releasing dissolved gases that gave it a rotten smell. The sound of pouring water was a frequent sound in castle kitchens. Aeration really helped to get rid of hydrogen sulfide and other volatile compounds. After this procedure, the stale water became fresher and more pleasant to drink. It was believed that movement expelled the dead spirit of stagnant swamps from the water. The finer the stream and the greater the height of the fall, the better the result. Sometimes the water was run through gutters with ledges, imitating a mountain stream. Stones and pebbles were placed at the bottom of the gutters so that the water would bubble and foam. This structure could be located in the castle courtyard and served not only for purification, but also for decoration. The murmur of water was soothing and created a feeling of coolness in the summer heat. This method was often combined with filtration through cloth. A thick cloth was stretched over the neck of the lower vessel, and the stream of water, falling from a height, passed through it with force. The impact of the stream helped the water to seep through faster, and the cloth retained debris. This was a double action: purification by air and a mechanical barrier. Aeration was also used for rainwater that had been stored for a long time in closed tanks. Before use, it was necessarily aired by pouring it several times. This restored its fresh taste, which was lost during long-term storage in the dark. Without this procedure, the water seemed flat and heavy. Sailors knew that water in barrels would go bad over time, and used decanting as a way to revive it. Of course, this did not make spoiled water safe, but at least it allowed it to be drunk without holding one's nose. On the open sea, any way to improve the quality of the only drink available was worth its weight in gold. It was also believed that water that had seen the sun and wind was more beneficial to the body. This was part of the doctrine of the elements, where water must interact with air and fire, the sun. Practical sense was closely intertwined with a mystical perception of the world. Interestingly, this method required considerable physical effort. Pouring hundreds of liters of water by hand was hard work, which was done by the lowest servants. But the masters demanded that only living water that had passed through the air be served at the table. The simplicity of aeration made it accessible even to the poorest segments of the population. There was no need for expensive filters or silver. All that was needed were 2 buckets and a pair of strong hands. It was a way to refine even the simplest water, making it tastier and more pleasant. Are you ready for the shocking truth that plants were used as real technology in the past? Medieval man lived so close to nature that he perceived it as a system of tools that could be turned on and off as needed. He knew the properties of hundreds of plants as confidently as modern man knows the menu of his smartphone. This knowledge was not born in a single century, but from a chain of observations passed down from generation to generation. People noticed which plants grew near clean water, which died from rot, and which were capable of changing the smell and taste of water sources. Behind this practice lay a wealth of experience that allowed them to survive where we would not even risk drinking the water. Medieval society used moss, marsh plants, and charcoal not just as random handy tools, but as a whole purification system. It was a practical science based on constant observation. People looked at what plants grew in clean springs, where the water was always fresh and clear. They understood where water rotted and where it remained drinkable even without boiling. This knowledge allowed them to distinguish good sources from dangerous ones and to use natural filters as effectively as we use laboratory technology. Sphagnum moss was considered the king of all natural filters. People saw that swamps overgrown with this moss almost never smelled of mud, even if the water there was dark. They understood that this thick greenery had special properties that prevented decay and suppressed unpleasant odors. Sphagnum was so clean and sterile that it was used not only to filter water, but also to treat wounds. To purify water, it was enough to wash a bunch of moss in a flowing river and place it in a vessel. The water slowly passed through its fibers, becoming softer and fresher. Another important feature of sphagnum moss was its ability to retain impurities. It absorbed small particles of dirt, trapped silt, and even suppressed the growth of microbes. Thanks to this, the water remained clean longer than usual after filtration. People trusted moss so much that they took it with them on long journeys, using it as a compact and reliable purification system. They knew that where there was sphagnum, there was a chance to obtain safe water even in the most difficult conditions. Charcoal, which remained in the fire pit after a night's rest, was another powerful weapon against dirty water. It had the ability to absorb odors and tastes, making the water clear and pleasant. To use it, the charcoal was crushed with a stone or knife wrapped in cloth, and water was poured through it. People noticed that charcoal from birch or fruit trees worked better, leaving the water soft and slightly sweet. It was a simple technology, but its effectiveness was so high that it was used everywhere, from villages to military camps. The charcoal didn't just purify the water, it restored its freshness by removing the swampy taste. It was the ancestor of modern charcoal filters, created without any scientific tools. People trusted it so much that they stocked up on charcoal before traveling and used it at every opportunity. Even after long storage, charcoal retained its properties, which meant it was indispensable for survival far from settlements. In camping conditions, a crude but extremely effective filter made of herbs was used. People tightly stuffed the neck of a wineskin or flask with a bunch of stiff grass, young twigs, or sedge. This design trapped large insects, silt, and debris. The water passing through a dense layer of vegetation became cleaner and safer. This filter had to be changed frequently, but it was so easy to make that it was considered ideal for long journeys. It could be made in a minute by simply picking suitable plants from the nearest river. Despite its simplicity, such a filter often saved lives. People knew that rapid water purification was necessary in situations where there was no time to build a fire and boil water. Grass filters were used by hunters, travelers, and shepherds. It was another technology created by nature and enhanced by human observation. Another common practice was to throw bird cherry or rowan branches into a container of water. These plants release substances that suppress the growth of microorganisms. People noticed that water with such branches did not spoil for a long time, even when stored in warm conditions. This property made rowan and bird cherry ideal aids for those who went into the forest for several weeks. The water acquired a slightly tart taste but remained fresh and safe. This technology was especially valuable in regions where there were no fast-flowing rivers or natural springs. People knew how to choose the right branches and how long they could be used. It was an art passed down from older hunters to younger ones. Survival depended on how correctly this knowledge was applied. Stones also played a significant role in water purification. Flint, black and shiny, was considered to bring purity. People lined the bottom of wells with flint stones to keep the water clear. They saw that water passing through flint lost its cloudiness and unpleasant taste. Later science would confirm that silicon does indeed participate in the precipitation of impurities and improves water quality. The use of flint was so widespread that it was even placed in storage barrels. People believed that the stone purified the water from within. This was based on many observations accumulated over centuries. Such respect for natural materials made them part of a survival system based on experience and trust. Plants were the first line of defense against disease. Moss, charcoal, bark, branches, all were part of a complex and effective water purification system. Without this knowledge, life in the forest would have been impossible. In the next chapter, you will learn how human senses replaced chemical laboratories and helped determine water quality without instruments. In the absence of laboratories and testers, the main tool for analysis was the human senses. Medieval people developed an incredible sensitivity to the slightest changes in water quality. An experienced water carrier or scout could determine whether water was safe by its smell, color, and even the sound of the stream. It was an art bordering on survival instinct. The first step was always a visual inspection. They looked not only for turbidity, but also for the behavior of the inhabitants of the reservoir. If there were fish, frogs, and water striders in the water, it was a good sign. If the water was crystal clear, but there was not a single living soul in it, it aroused suspicion. Dead water, where no one lived, was considered dangerous, possibly poisoned by ore or herbs. Smell was the second and most important criterion. They scooped water into their palms and warmed it with their breath to enhance the aroma. Any hint of rot, manure, or rotten eggs was a sign of danger. Good water should smell cold or nothing at all. Our ancestors' sense of smell was much keener than ours, unspoiled by the chemical smells of cities. They tasted it with the utmost caution. First, they wet only their lips, then the tip of their tongue. They waited a few minutes listening to their sensations. If there was no burning, bitterness, or astringency, they took a small sip. It was a real tasting, where the price of a mistake could be life itself. There was a profession of water tasters, people who searched for and tested sources for castles and cities. They knew the signs of good water. It had to wash well, cook vegetables quickly, and leave no scale. These people were worth their weight in gold because the health of hundreds of people depended on their verdict. Particular attention was paid to temperature. Spring water had to be ice cold even in hot weather. If the water in the spring was warm, it could mean that it was too close to the surface and collecting dirt. Coldness was a guarantee that the water came from deep. Animals were also observed. If a horse or dog refused to drink from a stream, humans would not touch it either. Animal instinct was considered more reliable than human understanding. Animal trails often led to the cleanest springs in the forest. They also checked the water for heaviness. It was believed that good water should be light and not weigh on the stomach. This is a subjective feeling, but it had a basis. Water with a large amount of impurities was indeed perceived by the body as heavier. Light water quickly quenched thirst and gave strength. In doubtful cases, they resorted to the help of scouts. They put a leech or a small fish in the water. If the creature behaved actively, the water was considered conditionally suitable. If it died or tried to get out, the source was marked as poison. These methods, however primitive they may seem, worked. People learned to trust their senses and the signals of nature. In a world without guarantees and quality standards, personal experience and attentiveness were the only insurance. The choice of a place to collect water was never a random gesture or an act of inertia. It was a strictly calibrated and often regulated process based on rules that were passed down from generation to generation. In some regions, these rules existed in the form of traditions, while in others, they were even formalized as written laws. People understood that clean water was life, and they took this issue extremely seriously. The main rule, which was observed almost everywhere, was that drinking water was always taken upstream from the settlement. Even in times of war, famine, and chaos, this simple rule remained inviolable. Rivers and streams were divided into conditional zones, and this division was not formal, but vitally important. The upper zone, located in front of the village entrance, was considered sacred territory. It was from there that water was taken for drinking, cooking, and the most vital tasks. In this zone, it was strictly forbidden to wash clothes, water animals, wash vehicles, or dispose of any waste. Violation of such taboos was perceived as a threat to the entire community. The punishments were severe, from large fines to expulsion and corporal punishment. The community understood that the purity of their water meant the health of their children, the elderly, and all residents. Downstream was the area for practical needs. Here there were special footbridges for washing, where women rinsed their laundry and shepherds brought their livestock to drink. This area was important for farming, but it was strictly separated from the drinking area. And even further downstream, outside the village territory, there was an area for disposing of waste and household dirt. This natural filtering downstream, cleanliness at the top, waste at the bottom, reduced the risk of disease even without knowledge of bacteria. People acted intuitively, but their intuition was backed by centuries of experience. Special attention was paid to springs and wells. If a clean source was found, they tried to protect it from debris, animals, and precipitation. Wooden houses, stone sheds, or simple roofs were built over such wells. This made the source durable and safe. The spring was perceived as a gift from heaven, a source of strength and health. Polluting it was considered not just a violation of the rules, it was perceived as a sin and blasphemy. Local residents regularly cleaned such springs, showing them respect and gratitude. During military campaigns, water became a matter of strategic importance. Commanders sent special reconnaissance teams to capture sources upstream. This was more important than capturing bridges or advantageous positions. If the enemy controlled the upper reaches of the river, the army could be left without drinking water and die of thirst or disease without even entering into battle. Commanders knew that victory was impossible without access to clean water, and protecting water resources became part of military discipline. The situation was more complicated in cities. There was a network of wells, each serving a specific part of the neighborhood. The location for a well was carefully chosen. away from cesspools, stables, slaughterhouses, or tanneries. City regulations prescribe the distance between drinking water sources and potentially dangerous places. But narrow streets, dense buildings, and lack of space sometimes made it impossible to follow these rules. That's why cities suffered more often from epidemics. Water couldn't always be protected as carefully as in villages. In rural areas, water conservation was much more prevalent. People lived closer to nature and noticed even the slightest changes. They understood that clean water had a direct impact on their family's health. Neighbors kept an eye on each other to ensure that no one polluted the stream. Collective responsibility replaced laws and guards, and simple agreements worked better than any document. If someone broke the rules, it was considered a threat to everyone, and they were quickly put in their place. If drinking water had to be taken from a large navigable river, people chose water not from the shore, but from the middle. For this, they used boats or long scoops. It was believed that the water near the shore was stagnant, rotten, or lazy, while in the middle of the riverbed it was alive and fast. And there was a rational grain in this. The current purified the water, carrying away debris, while the banks were polluted by people, animals, and vegetation. This practice helped to obtain better quality water, even in the most unfavorable conditions. Knowledge about rivers, springs, streams, and swamps was passed down by word of mouth. People knew where the water became murky in the spring and where it remained clear. They remembered which streams dried up in the heat and which were fed by underground sources and flowed all year round. This invisible map of water resources was part of the culture and everyday wisdom. It was more important than official maps because it was based on the observations of dozens of generations. How do you keep water fresh when plastic doesn't exist and glass is too fragile? The main container in the Middle Ages was a wooden barrel. But wood is an organic material. It can rot and become a home for mold. To turn a barrel into a reliable storage container, craftsmen used fire. The inner surface of the barrels was carefully burned until a layer of charcoal formed. This layer of charcoal served two purposes. First, it created a sterile barrier between the wood and the water, preventing the boards from rotting. Second, the charcoal acted as a powerful absorbent, continuing to purify the water during storage. It absorbed harmful substances and gases, keeping the water fresh and tasty for a long time. Charred barrels were standard for sea voyages and long stays. Water in such containers could remain unspoiled for months. Of course, over time it acquired a specific taste, but it remained safe. Coopers who knew how to char barrels properly were respected craftsmen with high salaries. The barrels themselves were stored wisely. They were never placed directly on the ground so that the bottom would not get damp and rot. Special stands or stone pedestals were used. The lids were fitted as tightly as possible, sometimes filling the gaps with wax or resin to prevent dust and insects from getting inside. The barrels were periodically washed and refired. This was a renewal procedure that was carried out before each new batch of water was added. The smell of smoke from the water was considered a sign of its purity and the reliability of the container. In addition to barrels, ceramic vessels were used, which were buried in the ground up to their necks. The earth served as a natural refrigerator, maintaining a stable low temperature. In the coolness, the reproduction processes of any life in the water slowed down. Huge stone reservoirs were built in castles, the walls of which were also covered with special compounds or burned with torches. These were strategic reserves in case of war. The care of these cisterns was the responsibility of the castle's castellan. Even a simple traveler's flask, made of leather or wood, required care. It was steamed with boiling water and herbs, or rinsed with strong wine for disinfection. People understood that dirty dishes would spoil even the cleanest water. The firing technology was an ingenious solution that combined the availability of wood with the purifying power of coal. This made it possible to create mobile water supplies, which in turn made long voyages and military campaigns possible. Without fired barrels, the age of discovery might never have happened. This was an example of how simple processing of a material could radically change its properties. Fire, which usually destroys, here acted as a creator and preserver of life. We have come to debunk one of the most enduring and appealing myths about the Middle Ages. It is often said that people of that time did not drink water at all and replaced it with wine or beer. This sounds vivid, fits comfortably into stereotypes, and has therefore become firmly entrenched in the popular consciousness. But the reality is much more complex. Low-alcohol beverages were indeed widely used as a source of calories and a safe liquid, but they could never completely replace ordinary water in everyday life. People had to work hard, and no amount of beer could replace clean water in their lives. The human body is designed in such a way that it constantly needs water, not just beverages with additives. It is impossible to get through a hard day's work in the fields or in a workshop by quenching your thirst with alcohol alone. Even weak beer causes dehydration if drunk without adding water. Therefore, peasants, craftsmen, warriors, and travelers drank water daily, and they drank a lot of it. All the water purification methods we talked about earlier did not appear for the sake of rare expeditions or ceremonies, but because people needed safe drinking water in large quantities. Without it, life simply could not continue. Alcohol in the Middle Ages was often mixed with water, but this was done out of necessity, not luxury. Pure wine was usually considered a drink for holidays or for rich people. In everyday life, it was more often diluted with water in a ratio of 1:2 or 1:3. The alcohol and acids in wine helped to disinfect the water, killing anything that could cause disease. This drink became a way to improve bad water, turning it into a safe liquid. This habit was inherited from the ancient Greeks and Romans, and it became firmly established in European culture. People perceived wine more as a means of purification than as a substitute for water. The situation was similar with beer. There was a so-called light beer, a very weak drink that even children could drink, but its basis was still the same water that had to be obtained and purified. Brewing did not free people from worrying about water. On the contrary, it required enormous amounts of it. Even to brew a small batch of beer, a lot of clean liquid was needed, and brewers were well aware of the value of good quality water. They knew how to choose sources and made sure that the water did not spoil their work. The myth that people in the Middle Ages were almost constantly intoxicated arose because chroniclers preferred to describe rare, vivid events, feasts, holidays, weddings, and receptions at the homes of nobles. Wine really did flow like water there. But no one would write in the chronicles that a peasant drank 3 times from a well in the morning, or that workers quenched their thirst at a stream. These scenes were commonplace, and commonplace events rarely found their way into the pages of chronicles. But the absence of records does not mean the absence of the phenomenon itself. Water was the basis of life, hygiene, and food. Without it, it was impossible to make dough, cook soup, wash vegetables, or simply wash your hands before work. People valued cold, clean water and knew how to distinguish good sources from bad ones. Songs and legends were composed about good wells, considering them a gift of nature. A source of clean water became the pride of the entire village, because the health and well-being of all residents depended on it. In monasteries, where monks were subject to strict discipline, water was consumed in large quantities. Many monastic orders restricted alcohol consumption, so water became the main drink. Monks developed methods of filtration and purification, created complex plumbing systems, and took care of wells. It was in monasteries that knowledge about the construction of aqueducts and the use of natural filters was preserved. They were true masters of cleanliness in a world where dirt and disease were everywhere. The economic side of the issue was also important. Wine and beer cost money, time, or crops, because beer required grain and wine required grapes. Water, on the other hand, was free or almost free, unless a well needed to be cleaned or a water channel repaired. Therefore, it was easier and more profitable for most of the population to drink water. A poor man could not afford to drink beer every day, even the weakest kind. His life depended on the availability of good water, and he knew how to appreciate it. The image of the perpetually drunk medieval inhabitant is a caricature created by later writers and modern perceptions. People of that era were much more practical than we tend to think. They knew how to find a balance between water and alcohol, and used this balance to maintain health and safety. They drank water every day, but tried to ensure that it was clean and would not cause illness. This was a manifestation of their wisdom, accumulated over centuries of observation and survival. As you can see, survival in the Middle Ages was not a lottery, but the result of deep knowledge and observation. People were not helpless victims of circumstance. They used earth, sand, coal, silver, and gravity to tame the elements and make them safe. Their methods may seem primitive to us, but they were effective and accessible. These technologies, born of experience and trial and error, laid the foundation for modern water purification systems. We still use carbon filters, settling, and aeration, only at a new technological level. The wisdom of our ancestors lives on in every glass of clean water we drink today. Which of these medieval purification methods do you find most inventive? Would you dare to drink water purified by an earth pump? Write your opinion in the comments, suggest topics for future investigations, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to learn about history that is not written in textbooks.